I've been very fortunate. Every day, when I drive on the Paramount lot, which gives me as much of a thrill as the first day I walked on the lot, I realize how lucky I've been to be a little boy all the way across the country and wanting to be here at Paramount and learning to make movies. And it happened. How are you?
Hello. Hi. This is AC Lyles, everybody.
I've been associated with Paramount since 1928.
For real?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I thought you were kidding.
No. I was born in Jacksonville, Florida, and in Jacksonville we had a beautiful movie theater. It was owned by Paramount Publix, and on my 10th birthday, I saw a movie that Paramount had called Wings with Clara Bow, Richard Arlen, Charles Buddy Rogers, and Gary Cooper. I saw the picture. I saw it twice. Wings won the first Academy Award for a movie, 1928. And in 1929, when they had the first Academy Award dinner in the Blossom Room of the Roosevelt Hotel on Hollywood Boulevard, Wings got the award, the Best Picture. And that picture impressed me so much, although I was only 10 years old. The picture was so authentic. There was nothing in it with special effects. They had big aerial shots of the American forces against the German forces in the sky. Those were all filmed in the sky. Charles Buddy Rogers and Richard Arlen, the two leads in the picture, they put them in the cockpit of these ancient planes in 1928, and they put a camera, mounted a camera, and they had a button. And they were their own cameraman. And when they would react to something, they'd hit the button and they reacted with fighting in other planes and things you would see, and they would do it, and then they'd cut it off to some other action and things. And they did this. The picture, not only because it won the Academy Award, became the biggest picture Paramount had made at that time. Adolph Zukor had founded Paramount, and I said, I want to work for Adolph Zukor. And I went to the manager and said, I want to work for the theater. And he gave me a job putting bumper stickers on the back of cars. Every afternoon I'd go there after school and I'd put 100 bumper stickers on the back of cars downtown. And I went to him and said, why don't you put me in uniform and let me be the page and put me to the entrance to the theater and greet the people. So they come out, I said, good evening, welcome to Paramount, I appreciate you coming in, welcome to the Florida Theater, goodbye, I hope you enjoy the picture, see you next week. And I did that and had a spotlight on me. I wrote Mr. Zukor a letter. I said, Mr. Zukor, this is my 10th birthday, and I saw Wings, and I'm working for you, and I want you to know this, please keep me in mind. Signed it to him. Then he came through Jacksonville shortly after that, and of course I saw Mr. Zukor, and I said, Mr. Zukor, I'm the one, you got my letter about my coming to work here, and I saw Wings, and I said, Mr. Zukor, I want to come out to Hollywood and learn to make movies that you do. He was very kind, and he made a mistake. He said, I want you to save your money so you can come to Hollywood and keep in touch. That was his mistake, keep in touch. So I wrote him a letter every single Sunday. School didn't mean anything to me. Nothing meant anything to me except working at the theater and what am I going to say to Mr. Zukor this Sunday? And I didn't hear from him. It didn't matter, he was waiting for me to get to Hollywood. And then Gary Cooper, who was now a big star because of Wings, passed through and I saw him. And I said, Mr. Cooper, I'm going to be with you at the studio soon. He said, how do you know that? I said, well, Mr. Zukor's waiting for me. He has a job for me. He's just waiting for me to save enough money to get on the train to come to Hollywood. And I said, I'll be with you. And he said, how do you know this? I said, oh, I write Mr. Zukor every Sunday. He said, you write every Sunday? I said, yes, sir. Do you hear from him? I said, no, I haven't heard from him. It doesn't matter. He's just waiting for me. He said, give me a piece of paper. And he said, dear Mr. Zukor, I'm looking for, what's your name, kid? I said, AC Lyles. He said, I'm looking forward to AC Lyles being at the studio with us, Gary Cooper. So that Sunday, my whole letter was about meeting Gary Cooper with a letter enclosed. And for the first time, I heard from Mr. Zucker. Well, not really. I heard from Sidney Brecker, his secretary. And she said, Mr. Zucker gets your letter that you write every Sunday. And he wants you to know you don't have to write every Sunday. You write every 3 or 4 months, and that would be enough to keep in touch. The devil with that, I kept writing Mr. Zucker every Sunday. Now I wrote Sidney Brecker a letter every Sunday. My father had passed away, and my dear mother had absolutely no control of me because I was obsessed. When I was 10 years old, I adopted 3 words: obsession, obsession, obsession. I was obsessed with getting here to Paramount and learn to make movies with Mr. Zucker. It shows the power of motion pictures. I know personally, it changed my whole life, because if I hadn't seen Wings, I probably wouldn't be here at Paramount. I saved up enough money to buy a one-way ticket from Jacksonville, Florida to Hollywood. I think I set up for 4 days and 4 nights. I got to Hollywood and I went to the gate, and they thought I was a fraud until I said, just call his secretary, Sidney Brecker. And she remembered me, Mr. Zucker remembered me, and he said, bring him down. I talked to Mr. Zucker, and he gave me a job. When I came here, all ladies were typists. Now they're writers, directors, producers, heads of studio. When I came here, we had 2 minorities. Now they're writers, directors, producers, some of our leading people. And when I came here, all producers that were older men. Now a lot of them are so talented and young, I burped them before I talked to them. But we could make 55 features a year just with our contract list. We had about 125 to 150 actors on the contract. We had a lot of new people here getting $100 a week, what we call stock contracts. William Holden, Susan Hayward, and Anthony Quinn, and people like that who were just starting, and I saw them just mushroom, explode into big stars on the lot. We had probably 50 writer-directors preparing for all of these things for it. In those days, we had people like Cecily DeMille, who was one of the biggest producers and directors in our town. John Ford was here. Billy Wilder came in later. Preston Sturges came in. So it was a time that probably would never come back. Those times will never come back. I wish Mr. Zucker were here to see what's happened to the company that he started. Mr. Zucker had a lot heading up this company, but as his office boy, I was with him every day, running errands for him, and sitting in, he always had me sit in his office. For instance, Mr. Zucker had his hats handmade. He loved these hats. And he went in a theater one night, and it used to be, the men wore hats, everybody, and under the theater seats there was a wire shaped like a U, and you'd put the crown here, and it held the brim, held it on there, and it was under, and Mr. Zucker put his very cherished hats under a seat once, and someone had put a lot of gum there, and it ruined his hat. So from then on, one of my duties was to accompany Mr. Zucker every place he went, and I'd hold his hat so it wouldn't get damaged. So he would go up to see Sid Grauman, who owned the Grauman's Chinese Theater and the Egyptian Theater, and I'd sit there with lunch with him and hold Mr. Zucker's hat. I'd go to sneak previews with all of them, and I'd sit and hold Mr. Zucker's hat. That was one of my big duties, was Mr. Zucker's hats. And he just had me in the office, and he never excluded me. No matter who would come in, imagine this young kid, me, being with Adolph Zucker, the biggest mogul in Hollywood, and participating in his activities by just being present. And Cecily DeMille coming in, and they talk about things. For instance, Gloria Swanson, who'd been one of our biggest stars, would come over to visit Mr. DeMille and Mr. Zucker. And Mr. DeMille would say, hey, see, Gloria Swanson's coming. Meet her at the gate and bring her to the office. And I'd bring her in, and they would talk, and I heard stories about the early days here with Gloria Swanson as a big star. For instance, she was doing a picture with Cecil B. DeMille, and in it, it was very important that story point, that she have an ermine coat, and she drug it across the floor a lot. And the production manager came in to see Mr. DeMille and said, Mr. DeMille, ermine coats are very expensive, and if we rent one, they're very objectionable to Miss Swanson dragging it across the floor. But we have found an artificial chinchilla that looks just like the real thing, and it's very inexpensive, and we can make that into a coat. We photographed it, both in still photographs and movie film, and it looks just like chinchilla, and nobody will know the difference. Mr. DeMille said to the production manager, Miss Swanson will know the difference. She would drive up, and instead of driving through the auto gate, she'd get off in the exit from the main street, because there'd always be 100, 200, 300 people, fans, waiting for stars to come by, and she wanted to make her entrance. So she had a chauffeur-driven car, ride up, and chauffeur would open the car, and she'd get out, and she had two attractive young ladies with baskets of rose petals, and they throw them in the air and fall on the ground, and she walked into the studio walking on rose petals. Then, when they remind her of this, then she said, remember what Theda Bara did? She said Theda Bara then got 4 girls with baskets of flowers to come in and to throw these things. When I was an office boy for Adolph Zucker, remember, I was getting $18 a week. He would give me incentives with Mr. DeMille. And DeMille and Mr. Zucker, I'd sit there and they said, write this down, AC. I was getting $18 a week. I'd write it down. I still have those things, write it down. And Mr. Zucker said, AC, we want you to drive a nice car. Be seen drive a nice car, maybe a Cadillac. Buy a Cadillac. Yes, sir, $18 a week. And then Cecil B. DeMille said, AC, take your money and buy a lot in Bel Air. It's the most exclusive part here. We want you to live in Bel Air and build a home in Bel Air. Yes, yes, sir, Mr. DeMille. Build a home in Bel Air, period. And then Mr. Zucker said, AC, this is very important. Write this down as I say it. Yes, Mr. Zucker. Dress British, but think Yiddish. So I wrote down, dress British, but think Yiddish. I knew all of the stars on the lot because I'd take them on the set. The guest was Mr. Zucker's, and I would introduce them, have photographs made with them and things like that. And Mae West had returned here, and they were doing a test on her, and I got along great with Mae West. And sometimes she would pout a little and leave the set and walk from the set to her dressing room. And they would call me, AC, she's in our dressing room. So I'd go by the publicity department, and we had photographs of all of our stars in canvas back loose leaves, dozens of them. And I'd grab one of Mae West, and I'd go and knock on the door. Who is it? Why do you want? I said, Stacy, come in, AC, sit down. And I'd sit down, and I said, Miss West, the publicity department wants to get a new picture for the fan mail department. They go out. She said, let's look at it. She loved to look at a photo of herself. And we go through them. Then she'd say, you know, AC, tell them that they should retouch that just a little right there. And she'd make different comments. And she said, do you like that? I said, I love that. She said, I did. That's it. I said, fine. I said, Miss West, may I escort you back to the set? She said, of course, AC, let's go. So we go back to the set. How she was found, Adolph Zucker was a marvel at talent. And he saw her on Broadway and brought her to the studio where she had a supporting part in a picture.
Hey, Gorilla! Come here.
Hello, Marty.
Where's Joe? I gotta see that little rat.
Well, he's pretty busy right now, Marty. He's
Don't
got
give me that. You give it to me twice over the phone.
Yeah, no, Marty, but
No sale, no sale. I'm gonna see him tonight.
Well, you wait right here, and I'll go upstairs and see if he's there.
And I'll be right up after you. Oh, honey, how's business? Fine. You been insulted lately? Goodness, what beautiful diamonds. Goodness had nothing to do with it, dearie.
And that scene made her, she kept the gates open for five or six years here. Bing Crosby was our big star for 36 years. I mean, one of the biggest ever in our industry. And Bing was, or Mr. Crosby, I call him that, was a very interesting man. He was not aloof, but rather private. If you liked you, you're in. And he would get on his bicycle. Everybody had a bicycle on a lot then, and he'd ride his bicycle, and he'd either whistle or sing. And I'd grab a bicycle and go behind him, listening to him. And one day by stage 5, he turned right, I didn't, and I hit him broadside. I hit the biggest star we had, the biggest star in Hollywood, and he's in wardrobe for a picture, and I hit him, and we both were on the pavement. I look at him, I hope he's not hurt. And he looks at me, and he smiled. He said, "Kid, what didn't you like, the song or the singer?"
Hello. What's doing?
But he not only was a wonderful singer, he became a great actor. He won Academy Award for his acting. And one of our classics, of course, is White Christmas with Bing, Danny Kaye, Rosemary Clooney, and Vera Ellen. And Bing's singing A White Christmas, I think that song by Irving Berlin has been recorded more than any other song, and just is a tremendous, tremendous heart. We had a call from a man named Hoblazel, owned theaters in Texas, and he told Adolph Zucker and Frank Freeman there was a new girl that won a beauty contest, 19 years old, that we should test. So she came here, they tested her, put her under contract, and Mr. Zucker and Frank Freeman said, "Take her around and introduce, you know everybody, introduce her." We got out here, right here, and she said, "Which is Bing Crosby's dressing room?" And I pointed out there, 117. She said, "I have to tell you, I am in love with Bing Crosby and I'm going to marry him." So I said, "In that case, you should meet him." Went out to the set, and I went over to him and I said, "This young lady just won a contest in Texas, and she tells me she's in love with you and she's going to marry you." And Bing called her Tex. He said, "Tex, in that case, hi, we better get acquainted." They were married, had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. Amazing. When I first came here, this was a garden, unlike it is now, with a big fish pond in the middle and goldfish in it. And Bing Crosby and Bob Hope would come out and practice golf here. Then they'd get back here and see how many balls they could shoot over the production building. And we replaced the windows up there a lot.
Nice shot here.
Sometimes at night, I walk around the lot, and it's like Phantom of the Opera. I can hear the organ, playing that, and it's you get an eerie feeling because I look at each building, remember the history of it. Rudolph Valentino was a big star for us. I used to take Mr. Zucker's parties around, and I wanted to say things that sounded great for Rudolph Valentino. So I said, Mr. Valentino lived in that apartment, and there were hundreds and hundreds of fans out here every day waiting for him to emerge, walk across the street into the entrance to Paramount. And to save him time, I said we dug a tunnel from that building into the studio so he could avoid all of the clamor and the hesitating time to sign autographs and to go into the plane. And I tell you, that's not true. And I tell you how I know. A little boy that took Adolph Zucker's parties around the lot always added something glamorous. And that little boy started a myth. He told a lie. And I know he told a lie because I'm that little boy. So there's really no, and I've been asked all the time, where's the tunnel? Where's the tunnel? There is no tunnel. When I was an office boy, there was a big concern if Pauline Goddard had married Charlie Chaplin. Everybody wanted to know. And one day, Jaime Fink, who was a photographer for Photoplay magazine, which was the foremost popular movie magazine, came by and gave me a picture he shot of Paulette Goddard and said when she's on the lot, have her autograph it. So I took it in to her. I had sold a story to a magazine about some of our stars, including her. And she thanked me very much for the nice things I'd said. This article by a Paramount office boy about the stars. And she said, what is the biggest story you could have? I said, Miss Goddard, the most popular story around town now, of course, is, she said, you mean about, am I married to Charlie Chaplin? I said, yes. And she said, would that be a big story? I said, my gosh, yes, yes. I said, it's a story that Luella Parsons and Hedda Hopper and Army Arch have been trying to get for a long time. She said, well, set out and I'll tell you about it. She said, yes, I am married to Charlie Chaplin. I said, really? And then she told me the whole story of where they were married, who was there, and went in great details. And I'm thinking in my mind, remember this for the story, because I'm going to have the scoop of years here. Paulette Goddard, Charlie Chaplin, they're married. Then she looked at me and she said, I have one thing else to add. I said, yes, Miss Goddard. She said, if you ever tell the story or put it in print, I'll have you fired. So from then on, every day, I'd read the paper thinking somebody else got the story and she was going to blame me. I read every magazine I could think of, thinking, oh my God, I hope this story doesn't get out. It eventually did years later. Mr. DeMille came in to see Mr. Zucker several times a day. And I got very close to Mr. DeMille and to Mr. Zucker. And they'd often sit me down and talk to me about my becoming a producer. I remember once we were there and Cecil B. DeMille said to me, AC, when we make you a producer, if we give you $500,000 to make a movie, if you can make it look like $1 million picture, then you're giving us $1 million picture. And Mr. Zucker, of course, looked on the other side. He said, AC, on the other hand, if we give you $1 million to make a movie and it looks like $500,000, then you're giving us a $500,000 picture. So it was that way with Cecil B. DeMille and Mr. Zucker with me. They were my mentors. Mr. Zucker and Frank Freeman, the studio decided to make me a producer. The first script they gave me was a gangster picture. And I was having dinner with Jim one night, Jim Cagney, and I said, Jim, did you ever think about directing a picture? He said, oh my God, not if they gave me a studio. Why are you asking me that? I said, because I got my first script now as a producer, and it's something I think you'd be interested in. He said, acting? I said, no, directing. He said, I've never directed. I said, you know that. You started the gangster picture. And he said, well, when do we start? I said, I have to talk to Mr. Zucker. So I came in, I brought Jimmy in, had him stay in the outside office, and I went in and talked to Mr. Zucker. Mr. DeMille was in the office too. And we talked. And he said, now, you got to get a director for this picture. I said, I have someone I'd like. He said, what has he done? How many pictures has he directed? I said, Mr. Zucker and Mr. DeMille, he's never directed, and you want him to be a director on a picture? I said, he knows the subject matter very, very well. At least talk to him. So I brought Jimmy in, and of course, when they saw Jimmy Cagney, they were very impressed because he was one of the biggest stars in town, and he started the gangster pictures. They agreed it'd be a wonderful idea to have him direct the picture. He said, I'm going to do it under one condition, something I want. And I'm sure they thought, being Jimmy Cagney, he was going to ask for the moon and money. He said, I'll do it under one condition. I'm not paid. I don't want to get any money for it. I just want to do it as a favor for my friend AC. And he did the picture completely on the cuff as friendship for me. We had several titles on it, and we finally settled on Shortcut to Hell. And he was just a wonderful, wonderful director.
What are you doing?
There's just 2 guys up there. That's better odds than 20. You hear that? The place is crawling with them.
Please, just go out there with your hands up. If you don't shoot, they won't.
When we started to do the first scene, Buzz, of course, went to Jimmy, the director, and said, how do you want me to set up the camera, Jimmy? He said, point it toward the actors, and walked away. I did my first Western. It made its money back in Italy. And they said, how many of these can you make a year? And I said, 4. So I started making 4 Westerns a year. It was interesting because there were a lot of locations in California that we used that are over in Arizona. They had a special place over there that had a Western street and things. Wherever you had a Western, we had a big Western street here that was probably the best in the country. Dick Arlen, Richard Arlen, made 78 pictures here. He was a leading man in 78 features here, starting with Silence Alone Up. And he was a big man. He was our leading man. And I was running errands for Mr. Zucker to all his sets and delivering mail and things. And one day he said, hey kid, what time is it? He was in wardrobe without a watch. And I said, I don't know, Mr. But I'll find out. And I asked the time. I came back, I said, it's 1:45. He said, son, what's your name? I said, A.C. Lyles. He said, I've been watching you running around and thinking. He said, I have a hunch about you. He said, someday you're going to be a producer. I said, really? He said, yes. I want to be in every picture you make. I thought he was kidding me. I said, you do? He said, I want to be in every picture that you make. You keep this in mind? I said, oh, yes, sir. If I get to be a producer every picture. Then about 3 days later, I get a call. Richard Arlen wants to see me on the stage, and I go there. And he said, I have a contract for all these pictures we're going to make. And I said, really? He went in and his dress and brought out a box all wrapped. And I opened it. It was a watch. First watch I ever had. And on the back, it said, A.C., your pal, Dick Arlen. He said, that's our contract. And when I became a producer, every picture I made, the dozens of them, I would send the script to Dick Arlen right away and let him pick his part. Someday Dick would take one day, some days a run of the show, whatever he wanted to do. And as long as he lived, I never made a picture without Richard Arlen in that picture. We went to Europe to do a picture with Spencer Tracy. Dick Arlen went with us. And it was around town, everybody said, well, you know, Dick's got a lifetime contract with A.C. Lyles. But that's the way it was, all those pictures I made. They were all people that I knew. They were my buddies. And I remember one time William Bendix, I was making a picture, called me, and he'd been on the road in a play. He said, you're in production, I'm not in it. I said, Bill, you've been on the road. He said, when you finish? I said, I finish tomorrow. He said, what are you doing? I said, I'm on New York Street with a lot of people. Richard Arlen, I said, of course, and Richard Widmark and them. And he said, I tell you what, I'll come over and just walk through the crowd because I want to be in every picture you do. So I said, okay. He said, now I have a 12 o'clock lunch date. I said, tell you what you do, Bill. Come at 10:30, and there's a blacksmith shop, and you can be the blacksmith. And when Rory Calhoun comes into town, he'll stop and say, where's the saloon? And I'll write 3 lines and you can do it. He said, I'll be there. So he came in at 11 o'clock and we put the leather jacket on and he was a blacksmith. Rory Calhoun came in rehearsing. He said, A.C., can I add a line to this? I said, okay. So he had 4 lines and he did it. And he made his 12 o'clock lunch date that way. And I didn't know it at the time. He was terminally ill. And that was the last picture he did. There was 4 lines in this picture, and he was a big star. This is the Adolf Zucker building, and that's the conference room. If you look out of the conference room, you see this building, which I'm pleased to because I'm next to Mr. Zucker's building. This is the A.C. Lyles building, named for me. And I'd like to take you inside and show you the entrance to this building. This is the entrance to the Adolf Zucker building. And this bus, when I came here, was in the entrance to the administration building. It disappeared. And I found it in Arizona some years ago, crated. We brought it here and had this base put on it. Mr. Zucker loved this bus. And when it was dedicated originally, we had pictures of Mr. Zucker and Mrs. Zucker doing it. And if you notice, there's a little shiny spot And every time I come by in reverence to Mr. Zucker and to all of the things that we here at Paramount, if it weren't for him, we wouldn't be here, I kiss his forehead and rub it. It's also very interesting, if you notice, Mr. Zucker had a little cauliflower ear here because when he was a youngster, he made extra money boxing, and he got this cauliflower ear from it. And when they did this bust on him, they put that in, which I was pleased. And for all of these years, 100 years, this man made us all here. He's responsible for everything that has happened at Paramount. Thank you, Mr. Zucker. We appreciate you. We love you. Thank you.